Welcome to the Taco Cast. I'm Crystal.
I'm Will.
You're the audience. Hi.
Welcome.
So today's topic was chosen by a viewer, Mary Oneson, asked specifically if we could talk about my cancer recovery and the emotional strength that I needed and that I gained to go through my cancer journey. A couple of things I'm going to address there. I don't often refer to my cancer treatment as a journey. I, for personal reasons and some things that have happened in the past, I tend to avoid that phrase, but it's an accurate representation, I think, because, you start at the end with this scary diagnosis, and ideally, at the end, you arrive at your destination, which is cancer-free, and screw you, oncologist, I'm not looking at you ever again. The other thing is, for a large portion of it, I didn't. And I know that sounds weird, and I will expand on that. But I don't really consider that I don't have some kind of like deep well of inner strength or anything like that. And as Bill can attest, although he has often told me he views it differently than I did, there were quite a few days where I just kind of laid there and didn't even have the emotional wherewithal to do anything. If I made it from the bed to the couch, it was a good day. He thinks that I'm being a little bit melodramatic. But
Well, I wouldn't say that, but...
On that note, I'm going to share an amusing anecdote, or what I consider to be an amusing anecdote, and then I'll move on deeper into the topic. But as most of you know, I worked in a clinical lab for a decade, close to 2 decades. And I was chatting with a gentleman once who had asked about my cancer recovery and stuff like that. And he was telling me that he knew that there was something wrong with him because he just couldn't get in his 5 miles that day. Now, this gentleman, from what I understand, was very physically fit before his cancer diagnosis, whatever. So, and I was not. I have always been a potato, and that's fine. I've accepted it, and I enjoy it, and I embrace it. I was very physically fit when I was in high school, soccer, sports, all that, and then I discovered potato chips, and it was all downhill from there. And it's okay. I've embraced it. I love it. Cheesecake is too important for me.
Don't forget your Big Macs.
And Big Macs. Actually, I don't really like them that much, but there was a point in time when I really did, until I discovered other foods. Anyways, I digress. So I looked at this gentleman, and literally the noise that came out of my face, I'm not able to replicate it, but it was something between, it was definitely some variety of scoff, and I was like, 5 miles? How did you even, when I was doing chemo, I couldn't even make it to the living room. Get out of my face with your 5 miles right now. Which segues into cancer treatment is different for every patient. There's no one standard treatment for any patient. Cancer isn't just one illness. It's hundreds of illnesses, multiple different kinds, and even 2 people that have the exact same kind of cancer, it can still be a little bit different. 2 women with ductal cancer, one could be hormone positive, or there's 3 of them that they test for, or one could be negative. It's and all of those factors go into your treatment. So I had dose-dense chemo. I got a lot of chemo, more than most people normally do, in a much closer amount of time, which means my treatment was going to be harder on me than other people. There was a gentleman that I was pen pals with, and I believe that for and I could be getting him confused with another person, but I'm fairly certain it was him, that his chemo was like every few months, and he got a light dose, so it's different. This particular gentleman, while we were talking in the waiting room together, he may have not, his chemo may have been completely different for me. Mine whipped my ass.
Say it lightly.
Yeah, it definitely kicked my ass. And I know some people I've told that story to before, and they're like, I don't understand why that's funny. And maybe you had to have been in me when that happened, but to me it's hilarious. Anyway, a lot of my cancer recovery In fact, I'm willing to say most of it. I'm willing to say 90% of it wasn't because of me. It was because I had people supporting me that I could turn to. Um, and not just my friends and family, they were very instrumental. But also my care providers. I had a good care provider. If it's one thing that I can recommend to somebody who is going through a cancer treatment, is find a doctor that you can get along with. That is instrumental. You need to be comfortable with your doctor, that you can tell them anything. And I mean anything. Because when you're going through cancer treatment, trust me, some stuff is going to happen that you're probably not going to want to tell anybody, but your doctor's going to need to know. So you need to be comfortable with them to tell them. And that is my number one piece of advice. My number two piece of advice is unsweetened iced tea is the only thing that is going to taste like it's supposed to. Everything else will taste like garbage. That was long-winded.
So, tell us about the strength. How did you find the strength to get through it all?
It honestly, a lot of times it depended on the day. And I know I tried to hide how I was feeling from you and Elizabeth. And I do recognize that I had varying degrees of success with that you guys saw through my bullshit a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But Elizabeth was in high school. You were so worried about me, and I was really concerned about how my illness was going to be affecting you guys. I really vainly wished... Oh, wow. Okay. That happened. All right. I very vainly wished that you guys wouldn't be affected by it. And sometimes I felt bad. I felt like, oh my God, I'm sick, and now my whole family has to suffer because I'm sick, and how fair is that? But you guys took care of me, and
it's okay.
You know, sometimes you think that you're okay with it, and then sometimes you just talk about stuff, and then that happens.
We're still here.
Thank you, hon. One of the things and I appreciate that more than you can know. One of the things that I noticed when I was in support groups and stuff like that is that a lot of people lose their support network. A lot of women going through breast cancer, their support network leaves.
I heard a lot of the horror stories. Men picking up and walking out of their wives just because they had breast cancer and they were going to have, removal surgery, or they did. And they then said that, they weren't attracted to them anymore. And I was just like, how in the hell does somebody do that? When you're at the lowest point of going through all that, how could somebody just pick up and walk away from somebody like that? And
they're a bastard.
Yeah.
That honestly,
that's the best way to put it.
I can't couch that in nicer terms. If you leave somebody because they're ill and they no longer look like they used to, you're a jerk face. You're an asshole, and there's irredeemable. And I do want to preface that with, I understand that sometimes an illness takes a toll on a family unit as a whole, and the family unit isn't really able to come back from that. Every family dynamic is different, and sometimes a protracted illness puts a stress on a family that wouldn't have been there beforehand, and sometimes neither person. There have been cancer survivors I've talked to who are just, they're so angry, and sometimes that anger comes out on the people we're closest to. Oddly enough, because we feel safe to express that anger with those people, but you can only take so much abuse.
Right. Likewise, at the same time, though, I have met a couple women through your journey, going through the chemo and radiation. I met who I would talk with in the waiting room while we were there and you were getting treatment, who decided, once they beat this, that it was a new day and a new game, and they were planning on leaving their husbands.
Oh, yikes!
Yeah, because it's like, you know what? Why be miserable anymore? At that point, they, their life had already been complete. What they didn't want, what their expectations of the relationship wasn't there. So they were like, you know what? I'm starting over, and I'm going to start over. I'm going to be happy. And it's just like, you go, girl. You know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you could see the look on the. And I remember sitting the radiation center, like, lobby, and watching people come in, and you could see that there was just a distance between them, that had been growing. And as they, they were in the first stage of, treatment, like you were, when they came in, initially they were holding hands, and then towards the end of the chemotherapy, now they're not holding hands anymore. She's walking behind him as they walk in, or he's walking behind her, but there's a distance between them. You could tell just by the body language that whatever was happening within their relationship wasn't as strong as it had been. And yes, the cancer treatment, and everything, it did take a toll upon me and Elizabeth. But at the same time, though, I mean, it was never an option for either one of us in our minds to say, what, forget you, and walk away. I mean, because maybe it's just who I am as a person. But I don't. First off, I don't. I have to, distance Elizabeth. I mean, because she's gonna love you because you're mom. But for me, you're just my wife. So I mean, but at the same time, though, it was never in my mind as an option to leave, because I love you and all of you. And it when you were hurting, it hurt me. When you got better, I got better.
Thanks.
So, but the strength, getting through the hardest parts, when you were beat down, not only physically from the treatment itself, but emotionally, how did you find the strength to get through it?
Rage.
There was definitely rage. There was periods in there.
I am a miserable sick person. When I don't feel good, regardless if it's because I'm full of cell killing chemo drugs or because I've got the flu, I just want everyone to fuck off.
Have you met your son yet?
Yeah.
That boy he is full of it when he's not feeling well.
I just want everyone to go away, leave me alone. I'm gonna sit here and feel like crap, and when I'm done feeling like crap, then I will entertain guests again. I don't want to look at anybody. I don't want to see anybody. I just want to lay there and want to feel like crap. It came in waves. But honestly, I think there was a big part of me that was, I'm not done. I'm not done. There's people I want to see, I want
Not done as in the journey is not done.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not done while I'm sitting there, and I'm just sick to death, and I can't eat anything, and I've lost 50 something pounds because I just can't keep any
Body
food
by
down.
chemo.
Body by chemo.
It's real.
And even my oncologist was worried. They were talking about ways to get food into me by force if need be, and not like they were going to shove a sandwich down my face, but like TPN or something. And I was just like, I don't know if you've noticed, sir, but I have the padding to spare. I'm going to be fine. At which case he was like, yeah, well, losing that much weight that quickly, your body still needs nutrients, and it still needs this, and, it is not healthy, and you're going to need to start gaining some weight, or not losing any more. But anyway, I just remember there was just a couple of times where I honestly felt close to giving up. I was laying there and laying on the couch and watching TV. I can't even focus, and I'm just like, this is miserable and it's awful, and I just want everything to stop. But I gotta go through it. I gotta go through it because I want to watch my daughter graduate high school, and I want to see where she goes in life, and there's people I want to talk to. There's things I want to do. You know, and there was a couple of times I remember that I was laying there, and I'm just, like I said, I'm just laying there and I'm just feeling miserable, and I'm just reminding myself, like, I am not done. And sometimes, and I know this sounds weird, sometimes you just can't get there. Sometimes you just can't remind yourself that there's shit that you want to do. You just feel that miserable, and that's okay too. You know, the strength to get through a hard part in your life, a miserable part in your life, it's not constant. Sometimes it's gone. Sometimes it's all the way gone, and you don't have any strength left. And you're literally just laying there, um, waiting for something to happen or to pat or whatever, you know. And that's perfectly normal, and that's okay. Those strength reserves aren't constant. They can't be constant, you know. It's an emotional drain just going through. But I was really energized. I was really energized by the people I met who were willing to go on that journey with me, you know, and they knew that they couldn't 100%, you know, nobody's going through it but you, but they could be there to support me. The wonderful people we met through the Moose organization who helped pay for some of my medications, my coworkers, some coworkers that I hadn't even talked to. One doctor in particular, with whom I had a very, we'll call it a contentious relationship up until this point. He would call me and demand things. I'd be like, dude, you know we don't do that. He'd get pissed, and he'd ask why we don't. I'd be like, I don't know. Nobody involved me in the decision. It wasn't like they asked me, like, hey, could we do this test? And I was like, no, because fuck that guy. Wasn't my decision, dude. Also, you've known this for like 10 years. Stop calling. And this was our relationship. He would call. I would get snippy with him. He'd get snippy with me. You know, we'd be pissed off at each other. This was the relationship I'd had with this doctor since I started working at this hospital. And he comes downstairs one day, and he comes up to me, and I'm demonstrating on Bill. He's like, if you need anything, you just let me know, okay? I'm here for you. And then he walks off, and I was like, I don't know how to, I can't process that. This isn't our relationship. This is, you know, but this man with whom I had constantly been at odds with, even he was there for me. And just knowing that there's people out there who are willing to help if you reach out for it, that did a lot. Because those times when you don't have any strength left, and it happens, those times, those people are there for you, and you just gotta. I could have called him up. I'm absolutely sure that I could have called him up and have been like, this shit sucks, and I cannot handle it anymore. And he would have said some shit to me about GPS testing or something like that, and I would have just been like, ah! And then I would have felt better because, you know, it was there.
And even then, you know, when we had pretty good medical coverage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Our copays for chemotherapy and radiation therapy were just absolutely retarded.
That's
and
not
then,
a good word to use.
I know, but I'm not speaking of a person. I'm talking about the bill.
Okay.
The copay bill was retarded. But then the prescriptions. There was one there they had you on where it was what, $1,300 for the prescription itself, and the insurance refused to cover it.
That was the anti-nausea medication, because none of the anti-nausea meds that our insurance would pay for, they didn't work. I had friends bringing leftover anti-nausea meds that they had, and I don't want to encourage drug sharing. I don't. Because it's not safe. Everybody's different. You weigh more, you weigh less, you've got a different metabolism. Men and women metabolize differently. It is not safe. But when you've reached a point where you can't afford the medication that you need, sometimes people do things that aren't safe. And until that happened, I hadn't understood that. Why would people share medications when you don't know what's going to happen, or what, you know, like, why would you do that? I have no idea. And then I'm laying here unable to eat anything because the medication that my insurance will pay for doesn't work, and I can't afford the medication that does work, And I'm like, oh, that's why. Oh,
Well,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense now. That's
remember, the same insurance company refused to pay for the anesthesiologist when you had your breast removed.
Mm.
They wanted you to do it without medication.
I remember that. I called them up and I was like, I see that you've rejected the
That's
payment
real, ladies and
for
gentlemen.
my,
They wanted her to do it without anesthesia.
Well, they did eventually pay for it, but I remember I got the bill and I called them up and I was like, I see that you've rejected the payment for the anesthesia for my mastectomy. What's that about? And there's like this long pause and some paper shuffling, and the woman's like, that may have been an error. And I was like, you fucking think? Like, maybe there's a woman out there that could have the girls removed and not have. But I don't want to meet her because that woman is hard.
I don't even think you could do that to a sociopath. And I mean, even they would feel
Well, there was
bad.
a gal that gave herself an appendectomy, I want to say.
Okay. All right. Well,
Like, I'm just saying, like, there's people...
I guess maybe if you could put yourself in some kind of a trance or something, maybe
Yeah.
then.
I'm sure that there's somebody out there who'd be like, yeah, cut it off. Let's do this. I got shit to do. Hurry up. But I'm not that person, and I don't think most people are. But yeah, and I think a lot of... Let me back this up a little bit. I don't want to say that they do stuff like that on purpose just to see what they can get away with.
Oh, they do. I'll say it. I'll say it.
Yeah. Honestly, sometimes I think insurance companies just dick around with people so that they can see.
Well, I mean, the same insurance company, even they were in the medical we had then was really good, and for the most part they treated us fairly, but there were things like that, and then when I fell down the manhole and messed up my arm and my shoulder, they refused to pay for the surgery or for the sling or the cast, but they were willing to pay for me to go see an acupuncture specialist. And I'm like, for what? How's that going to fix my arm? I mean,
Yeah, I don't understand that.
no, neither do I. And
Yeah.
and at the same time though, they were willing to shove opiates down my throat like there was no tomorrow, but they didn't want to pay for the surgery or anything else. But I got it fixed later on.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't know if I answered your question, Mary. I hope I did, and feel free to drop me a line.
Yeah, we've been all around the subject, but
Yeah.
we're sorry.
And
This is just who we are.
we'll we'll continue this conversation, Mary. Ask me anything you want to know, and I'll answer it to the best of my ability.
All right. Next and last, this is completely off the topic, but we're going to answer. She's going to try to answer another question that was asked by another viewer, Martha Dickinson, and she wanted to know about dipstick testing for drugs. From the clinical side on that, can you talk about when it comes to dipstick testing for drugs?
Dipstick testing for drugs. Now, I'm going to discuss this with the full caveat that it has been years since I've actually performed this testing. So some of the information I have for you may be out of date. At the time that I performed dipstick testing for drugs, it's a super simple test, and how do I rephrase this? Whenever you have drug testing done, chances are they're not actually testing for that drug. What we're testing for is the end product metabolite of your body processing that drug once it's been ingested. So you'll ingest that drug, and then your body is going to break it down to either use it or flush it or whatever. And what we're testing for is that metabolite that your body has processed, or the user has processed. I'm using the general you. So with that in mind, there's always going to be things that can throw a false positive, because lots of substances get broken down into the same end products. Dipstick testing doesn't differentiate between those. It's strictly looking for that end product. When you want to differentiate, that's usually when you go to like a larger laboratory or something like that, and they're doing a mass spec test or something like that. And in those cases, they both look for sometimes different metabolites. And then they've also got what they call an MRO, that's a medical review officer. It's usually a pathologist, and his job is to go through the patient's history and see if there's anything that could be causing that isn't a drug. So his job is to basically try to rule out everything that could have thrown a false positive. Depending on the kit manufacturer, depends on where the cutoff is, meaning it will not ping as a positive for levels under a certain amount. And that's going to vary based on your manufacturer.
Okay. Is that all you have to say on that, and from your experience?
That's. I was only experienced with one kit test.
How reliable are they?
So when you're talking about medical laboratory testing, you're looking for sensitivity and specificity. The sensitivity is the test's ability to pick up a positive. Basically, what it's looking for is actually there, and it says yes. Its specificity is its ability to weed out false negatives. So it's basically, how sure are you that a positive is actually a positive, and that you haven't missed a positive,
Right.
your false negatives and your false positives. Again, that varies based on manufacturer. The kit test that I was familiar with was very sensitive. It did have a pretty good rate for picking up positives, but it didn't have... It didn't have the best sensitivity, but for a kit test it did, because kit tests can't really weed out those false negatives because they're just picking up that metabolite. So depending on what you're testing for, certain medications will cause a false positive. Keeping in mind also, those medications are going to cause a false positive even if you're doing it through mass spec. The difference being is there's going to be additional testing on the back end that they can do to make sure that that's positive. When you're using a kit test, that's it. You've just got the dipstick, so there's no additional testing you can do to confirm that.
Should they back the dipstick up with actual lab testing to confirm either positive or a negative?
That's going to depend entirely on the application of the test. So if you're doing that kit test, say, in an emergency room situation where you're looking to see, do I need to give this person Narcan? No, there's no reason to do a backup testing. First off, it's cost prohibitive. It's expensive. That's why we do dipstick testing, because it's very cheap. And secondly, you're just looking to provide emergency medical care for somebody. The Narcan thing was kind of not necessarily an appropriate example, because chances are they've given that before the patient even hit the room. But was it an appropriate line of treatment? Let's do a dipstick test on that patient, see if that's actually what was wrong with them. Now, if they're throwing drugs in their urine and they've been given the Narcan, okay, this is probably an appropriate case of treatment. If they're not, something else is wrong, and we need to dig deeper to help this person. In that case, there's still no reason to do a backup test because you've already eliminated the potential issue. Basically, you'd just be looking to confirm your line of treatment, okay? And if it's negative, well, now you're moving on to something completely different. If you're doing something for a legal capacity, in my professional opinion, yes. And I also don't think that dipstick tests should be used in a legal capacity at all, in the manner in which they're handled in most clinical settings, because most clinical settings do not establish chain of custody. So there's no way for you to 100% confirm that that sample that you're testing belongs to the patient. Is it? Probably. It probably is. But you can't 100% confirm it. And so if you're doing legal testing, from my point of view, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm just a jerk with a microphone, in my point of view, you shouldn't use dipstick testing in the manner in which clinical lab does it, which is basically somebody comes, they bring you a thing, they're like, hey, stick a thing in there, is this person high? And you're like, yeah, they are. So That's not appropriate for clinical, or that's not appropriate for legal application.
But what about, in instances like parolees, and stuff like that, where they're doing these dipstick tests on them and if they test positive, they're locking them right back up, and they may not have used.
In my personal opinion, no, a dipstick test. In my personal opinion, a dipstick test should be used in that because again, mass spec is expensive, right? It's cost prohibitive to do it for everybody. But if it's positive, it should be followed up with a more specific test to find out whether or not that's actually positive. If it's negative, a lot of those tests do have a pretty good sensitivity. So if it's negative, chances are that negative is a true negative, and you can move about your day and you've saved everybody money. But if it's positive, no. There should now be a new specimen with chain of custody established that's tested in a medical laboratory with exacting standards and an MRO to back that up.
What about in the case of establishing custody of minor children? Should a dipstick test be the only thing that they use, or should they
I don't
just
think so.
forgo those dipstick tests and make them, come to a clinical environment like your lab, or when you worked at the hospital, not the lab you have now. I mean, but
If somebody handed me a bucket of urine in the lab I had, I'd be like, I don't know what you want me to do with this.
yeah, but I mean, where you worked before, that's what I mean. In that situation, have them come and actually do the testing there, where the chain of command, custody can be established immediately. That an actual professional, watches and monitors the actual person take the test and everything else.
So, I have two opinions, and they're based.
Tell us the opinions.
I think drug testing for child custody is a good thing. You want to keep children safe. I don't think that positives should necessarily preclude custody. And I say that because I know a couple of people who have substance abuse problems who are really good parents. I also know people with substance abuse problems who shouldn't be allowed around a cricket, let alone a living human being. But I don't think that a drug test in and of itself should be the sole determining factor. And because this is something that affects everybody, not just the parents, but vulnerable children who need somebody to look out for them, I feel especially care needs to be especially prudent in these cases. Chain of custody needs to be established, and I don't believe that testing should be done at one of those fucking fly-by-night drug testing laboratories that they set up everywhere, because those people push through the samples for the money and they don't actually care about the patient behind it. And there have been a couple of scandals involving mishandled specimens that, in my opinion, makes it more prudent for you to go with an established laboratory without outside influence. And by that I mean that asshole in Florida who owns the company that does the drug testing.
Yeah. It was a governor,
Mm-hmm.
and he owns the testing that he made mandatory, for, was it welfare recipients?
Mm-hmm.
So he was going to pocket personally off of the law he just passed.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah. All right. So we're going to end it there for this episode. Is there anything you would like to say in closing?
Mary, I hope I answered your question. Like I said before, if there's anything else you want to know, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll answer your questions to the best of my ability.
And Martha, we hope we addressed your question as much as we could from the clinical side of it, and I gave you my layman's version of it before, but I hope we helped you in some way understand a little bit more about that. So, all right. Thank you everyone for joining us again. Don't forget to like, subscribe, give a thumbs up, and if you want, the link is in the description of the video. where you can buy the Taco Podcast T-shirt. It comes in a myriad of different colors, and I have removed the black and the dark blue, which you can't see the writing on it at all because it's black print on a black T-shirt. Unless you're standing like right up next to it, you can't see it. It doesn't even look like there's anything there. But the T-shirt is available, and that we would greatly appreciate it if anybody wants to buy one. It helps keep the electric on. So thank you again, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Have a good week.